Hi everyone, welcome to my Cook at Home series with Tonya here at Cooking on the Bay. This morning we're going to be making a basil and parsley pesto. Now if your pesto is made in Liguria, in Italy, where it hails from, you would be using Ligurian basil, you'd be using local Parmigiano Reggiano, local garlic and a local olive oil, which would make it an authentic Ligurian pesto. But here we and pine nuts, of course. Here we change things a lot in Australia. And when I was cooking in Queensland, in my hinterland, Sunshine Coast hinterland cooking school, I used to use macadamia nuts all the time in everything I could. So I made my pesto with macadamia nuts. Now, and I also, when I was making it with macadamia nuts, I also like to, instead of 2 cups of basil, I like to use a cup of basil and a cup of parsley, and I still do because I sometimes find that the basil pesto is just a bit too strong. So if you want to change the recipe, it's quite easy to change. You simply substitute your my cup of parsley for an extra cup of basil, and you can substitute the 100 grams of macadamia nuts for my 100 grams of pine nuts, okay? The rest stays basically the same. If I do make a basil pesto, which I often do, to run through a sauce, as a sauce to run through pasta, and I'm going to run it through my zucchini noodles, which I'm going to have today or tomorrow, I always make the pesto in the mortar and pestle, because the mortar and pestle makes it, it doesn't cut it, it actually bruises it so that the basil doesn't lose its lovely green, it stays quite black. It stays quite green rather than going black. In the food processor, when you cut up your basil, because of the blades cutting up the surface of the basil into so many little pieces, it tends to oxidize and go black quite quickly. So you have to keep your basil pesto always covered with a film of olive oil to protect it, and that way it'll keep in the fridge for 2 weeks or so, okay? And the reason that I say I make it in the mortar and pestle when I'm running it through a sauce is because you don't want your pesto to lose its beautiful colour during the time that it's running through the sauce. Now in cooking class, I tend to make the basil and parsley pesto with macadamia nuts because it's a little bit different, and we use it as a dip, and we'll often put a dollop of it on top of our, might be ravioli, or it might be Napoli sauce or something like that, and we're going to be eating it immediately, so it's not so crucial that we keep the green colour remains during the time that we want it. I still keep the green colour by putting the oil film over it, but for running it through a sauce you just want it to have that bit of longevity. So all we're doing is basically putting it all into the food processor. I have picked off just the leaves, just left a few little stalks. You don't want big stalks. The big thick parsley stalks I've kept and put to one side. I'll throw those in my freezer for when I make the next stock, or when I need a bouquet garni for something that I'm going to withdraw from my stew. So we've got a cup of basil, a cup of parsley, 4 garlic, which I've just crushed with the back of my knife like so to remove the skins, and we're going to throw those in to the food processor. They're very big garlic too. It's because I like a lot of garlic. If you like a little bit less, just make them a little bit smaller. As I said, I've got the 100 grams of pine nuts, 120 grams of Parmigiano Reggiano, which has been grated, and that is all that we, and 100 odd mils of olive oil. We'll just see how much olive oil we use. Sometimes we use a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, and because I'm using pine nuts, they're very oily and very rich, so we probably won't use more than that. When I'm using it when I'm making this with my macadamia nuts, because they're denser and much firmer, you sometimes need a little bit of olive oil. So you just have to judge that as you go along. So we'll, very simply, now as you also know, you'll see in the delicatessens you can get coriander pesto, you can get capsicum pesto, and if you want to do those, you simply substitute your greens for the basil and the parsley for your coriander, substitute them for your skinned and seeded roasted capsicum, up to about 100 grams, okay? So just weigh it out and add it if you want a little bit more, add it. But you can play around with it. A pesto is a rough Italian dish. It doesn't have to be precise. I'm giving you ingredient quantities here just to give you the groundwork as a stepping stone. So we're going to, oh, and also when I put the basil in and the parsley, I press it down. I just don't let it sit up loosely. It's important to press it down so you get most of the, so you get a whole cupful. Okay, and it will need some seasoning. So there's a fair bit of salt out here, and it will need some pepper at the end of the day. These are both cup measures. So I might have a smidgen more basil, but that's okay. So then we're going to put in our garlic. I'll just chop the garlic in half to give it a bit of a start. Although it is bruised, some of these are broken up a bit more, as you can see. And we're going to put in our pine nuts. And that is it for the moment. I'll give it a first little blast. So it'll make a bit of noise, and then we'll put a little bit of oil in to get it going a bit better. Okay. So now, Michael, would you like to come and have a look closer in here? Because you know how excited I get about all these lovely green colours. So that's the start of it, and then we'll start adding our oil and our Parmigiano. It is so quick and easy. It is a really quick and easy dip to do. So I'll put a little bit of the oil in to get it going. About half. Might just brush down the sides. Another reason why I started using macadamia nut oils wasn't only because I was in Queensland and I had a macadamia farm down the road from my place in the country. It was also because I sometimes find the pine nuts quite rich. So it depends on the purpose that you're wanting to use them for sometimes also, and your flavour preference as well. So I'll just... The smell from the basil and the pine nuts is absolutely beautiful, and it just glistens. The pine nuts also glisten because they're full of so much oil, and I think that 100 mils is probably perfect. I'm just going to have a little taste. Now, if you're wanting to run this through your pasta, you may want to put a little bit more oil in to make it much runnier, okay? So that's up to you to decide when you're considering the purpose of what you're using it for. I'm going to give it a taste. And it will definitely need some salt, probably a teaspoon of salt and a little bit of pepper. Oh. The basil is just so beautiful, and you can smell it in the kitchen here. Where's my salt? Here. So about a teaspoon of this pink Himalayan salt. I'll try that. As I said, this will be absolutely delicious. A few spoonfuls of this I'm going to toss through my zucchini noodles, which I'm going to make with a dinner dish coming up for us here. I always have some pesto in my fridge, and it's either in the fridge or the freezer because it freezes very well as well. Let me have another little taste. I'll get the pepper in as well, I think. Beautiful fresh pepper. Have a look in here, Michael. Isn't that colour absolutely divine? Isn't that colour absolutely divine?
Yes.
I hope you all agree out there. Oh, I absolutely love this pesto. Okay, That is really lovely. It's to my taste. You may like a little bit more salt, a little bit less, etc. That's what you can do at home. Remember, when you are cooking at home, everything we do, we taste as we go along. You taste, you taste, you taste, and you build up on the flavours. And it is important, especially with the seasonings of salt. Salt brings out the natural flavour of your food. So that's what you're wanting, to bring out the natural flavour of your food. When you're using lovely fresh ingredients, the natural flavour is what you are looking for to enhance. Okay, so I'm now just going to dollop it into my serving plate here. And then I'll show you what I do if I'm doing this for... You can see this is reasonably thick. You could add more oil if you wished. In cooking class, this quantity we'll have with our focaccia. As I said, we might put it through dollop it on the top of the Napoli sauce. People love it so much that we actually end up by eating all of it. It's only occasionally that I get a little bit left over for our use. So it's being made all the time. So there you go. Now, that's just the most gorgeous colour, I think. Now, if I were keeping this for a couple of days, I would put some cling foil on the top. If I was keeping it, say, until dinner tonight, I put cling film on the top of it. If I were keeping it and wanting to put it in a little container, such as one of these containers or one of my round containers that I put in the fridge, I would smooth that over completely, as smooth as I can possibly get it, and put a layer of olive oil over the top, okay? Which is, and so when you're thinking of doing this, you need to consider, are you going to be storing it, you're going to use it immediately? If you're going to be storing it for a couple of days, you'll know that you're going to be adding extra oil on the top, and I just mix that all in. So it does get a little bit looser as you go along, so you have to decide on how you would like to use it at home. Okay, so thank you very much. I hope you enjoy making your basil pesto. It's quick and easy and a lovely thing to have for your guests and for yourself. Bye.